Hey guys, welcome to Crowning Judas. My name's Ashley, and I usually like to start off with a disclaimer that a lot of the things that I'm going to talk about could be triggering. So if you need to pause, step away, come back, please do so. This episode is called The Oracle, and so if you have not been following along, my son has asked me to name the episodes of my podcast after the track list for our favorite album, Razia's Shadow. It is a concept album by Forgive Durden. And this specific song on the album is one of my daughter's favorite songs. She sings it all the time. It's between this one and It's True Love. So I was actually really excited to do this one. But I've been really under the weather lately. And I have a bunch of shifts and, things going on. And so this is a little bit more off the cuff than I have been putting stuff out. But I've been very excited for this episode just because it speaks to kind of my mindset and the way that I've been able to get through the last, 36 years, but the last 3.5 years of this very chaotic journey that I have been blessed to be on to a certain extent, just because it has definitely helped me grow. I have changed so much in the last 3.5 years, and I feel like I've lived many different lifetimes just in that time span. And so I've spoken a lot about the different waves that I've gone through with the DWI and the slander and the defamation and the case with my ex-boyfriend. And this one, though, is very interesting because the oracle speaks after the aftermath, after the witness comes in, after Toba the Torah comes in and holds Arima responsible. This is kind of speaking to what's going to happen, what's going to rectify everything, how everything is going to play out. And so, as I've mentioned before, my healing journey started as a very esoteric practice where it was more spiritual deities. I wasn't really sure what to believe. I was raised Baptist. I was raised by both my grandparents, who are very devout, God-fearing Baptist. And so the church that I went to was also very connected with the high school that I went to. And it was very two-faced, I guess, and kind of turned me away from religion, or I guess organized religion, because they would be nice to you on Sunday and then talk crap about you behind your back on Monday. And as someone who is ADHD, so autism spectrum and ADHD, I can't do fake. I don't do small talk very well. The mask is really difficult for me, and I take people at their word, which has burned me a lot. And I'm very good at finding the patterns in things outside of myself. But sometimes it's a struggle if something is very close to me. And so I would, I guess, just be very confused in school at like, well, this person's my friend on Sunday, but they're not on Monday. And because I saw them on Sunday where it was fake, I guess I attributed that possibly to organized religion. And so, I stepped away from that. But I feel like I like to use the analogy that God kind of has us all on like dog training leashes where, if you've ever seen a dog training leash, they're very light and they're very, very long. So the dog has this perception, I guess, that they have all this space, all this freedom, all this ability to roam and be free. But one little nudge, from God, and you're right back to him. So I kind of feel like that's how I was, where it took hitting rock bottom and then going lower and lower and lower for me to come back to him. Because I feel like for me, I am very pragmatic, very logical. My ex-husband, who I was with for about 15 and a half years, is very science minded. And so we usually need to know the why. And so I was very excited about this episode specifically because it's taken me a very long time to learn that sometimes there is no why in the moment for us. God has his whys, God has his plan. And I'm not here to convince anybody of anything. As I've shared previously, I don't judge anybody. I just share my lived experiences, and you can kind of make your own determination. But everything that I have experienced ties back to the Bible. And I've shared previously that there's a scripture that I found a few months ago, and I'll put it on the screen, but it's in Isaiah, and it talks about, the crown ring. It talks about a crown. My name's Ash, and I have like an acorn tattoo. Acorns have been very significant for my journey, like little breadcrumbs. And finding this verse, incorporating all of that, was just very surreal for me, I guess, and kind of tied it all in. And so with this episode of The Oracle, there is a spoken word that I'll put at the end that I wrote that I feel like kind of encompasses all of it. But with The Oracle, my journey when I started, there was this interaction with somebody and Kundalini awakenings. I Googled my symptoms and that's what came up, and everything just seemed to fit. But I was triggered into my awakening where there was just this unmistakable knowing that I couldn't wear the mask anymore. Like it fell off. I couldn't fake anything anymore. I had been unhappy for a while. And I couldn't put that mask back on. No matter how hard I tried, no matter how hard I wanted to, I absolutely could not put that mask back on. And so then I, ended up separating from my ex-husband and started my healing journey. And what this looked like for me specifically was just wanting to be in nature. I've always liked nature, but it wasn't something that I sought. And when my awakening happened, I actively sought to be outside, to go sit under a tree. And lucky enough, where I worked, there was a park right down the street. So I would go and I'd sit under this big, I guess it was an oak tree, actually, under this big oak tree. And I would journal and journal and journal. And that journaling, when I started just kind of putting my thoughts on paper, it helped to not think about things anymore. And I found that after I got those thoughts out of my head, I could recall something if I needed to, but it wasn't something that I needed to ruminate on anymore. It wasn't something that I had to consciously try to make sense in my brain. And so, I was healing and healing and healing. And then with more healing came more creativity. And I developed these passion projects that I'm so excited about. And, the healing journey kind of started from there. So when the biggest trigger event happened, obviously with the divorce, that was a pretty big event. But with my accident that led to DWI charges and things like that, I really had to shift my mindset. And I remember specifically laying in the jail cell that I was sitting in. It was the middle of December, so it was freezing cold. I'm laying on the cement. Even though I'm pretty small, I don't know if you can tell on the camera, but I'm not a very big person. And so I'm laying on this cold bench that I barely fit on. And I'd been there, I got there at 3 a.m. and I didn't leave till about 10:45 at night. And I just remember laying there just praying to God, like, please, please, I don't know what the lesson is in all this, but I will do everything I can to figure it out if you will just get me out. Like, I can't be here anymore. And it wasn't that long after that I was released. I was on 48-hour felony hold because my children were in the car. And so I very much attributed that to God. And at the time, it still was an esoteric practice. And so getting back into that mindset of God, I had to detach God from specific organized religions because to me, I don't identify with any specific religion. I just have a very close relationship with God, and I do believe that Jesus Christ died for our sins. And so I'm still on my journey to kind of figure out what that means to me. Because in my head, in my like ADHD brain, labels for specific religions equate to hypocrisy in my mind. And so I'm still working on that. I'm obviously not perfect, but my mindset shift that had to change instrumentally is that all the things that I grew up believing about myself were wrong. Everything that I was told, everything that I was made to believe about myself, everything that was pushed on me, I had to throw it all away and try to figure out, okay, who am I without all of that? I feel like authenticity has range. And so I can be, super sweet 1 minute and something, gets me all feisty and I'm sassy. They're both me. And so I think the misconception is that you have to fit into a box of being just one way. And if you're this way with one person and you act different with another person, that you're being fake or you're being inconsistent, which that is absolutely not true. And so with this episode of The Oracle, I've come to find that all of the things that I went through as a child, everything with my parents separated when I was, I think, less than a year old, and my grandparents had full legal custody of me since I was 16 months old. So growing up with that stigma, and recognizing that authenticity and all of the challenges that I had growing up made me who I am today. It grew me into someone who is resilient, who can detach if necessary. I value my peace now more than anything. And so if anything disturbs my peace, like I'm done. And I don't have a problem detaching from things that disturb that peace. And so my favorite part about this trauma dump, I guess, is explaining the pattern recognition that I've noticed. And so with the Oracle in the album, it's talking about the aftermath from the destruction after he's exiled. And it's talking specifically about how to bring everything back together, how to heal everything, how everything is going to be made right. It's kind of a prediction of sorts of how things are going to go down. And so God has blessed me with an abundance of pattern recognition, discernment, intuition. But as I mentioned, things farther outside myself, I'm quick to pick things up, and things that are close to me, sometimes it takes a little bit longer because I have, I guess, kind of toxic empathy to a certain extent. And what I mean by that is, having a high emotional intelligence and empathy. I excuse people's behavior a lot of the time with understanding why they're a certain way or why they had that perception or why they acted a certain way towards me because of the things that they've been through. Which I've had to kind of reparent myself and say, okay, it's okay to understand why they did a certain thing, but the action is still not okay. So if you communicate that with them and nothing changes, you don't excuse that behavior. And so with pattern recognition, it's noticing the behaviors that are consistent. Where, in my previous relationship, I learned that when accountability was asked for or truth was asked for, that's usually when things would kind of go off the rails, or actions would be taken, or things would be gaslit or slandered. And so that's a pattern that I recognize. And so what's really great about that is when you heal that and you go through it and you're like, okay, I don't need to be in that cycle anymore. you tend not to repeat that. So you're real quick to recognize gaslighting, you're real quick to put up boundaries, and you know what to do when those boundaries are crossed. So if you are venturing into, like, say, online dating, and someone starts future faking or trying to very quickly build things up like, oh, I want a relationship right now, and oh, we're going to do this and we're going to do that, and we're going to, things are going to be this way. When you have been through those things before, you're able to recognize, okay, this is where we need to step back. These are the boundaries we need to put up. This is, maybe not an accurate representation of how this person feels about me. They're just trying to rope me in for manipulative reasons. And so what's really, really cool, to me anyway, is that my pattern recognition is also very, very much tied with God. And when I notice patterns and I am maybe too close to something, I will ask God specifically for a sign, even if it's, well, especially if it's something that I don't want to be true. I will ask for a sign. And I'll usually make it something that I wouldn't typically see, or something that would be out of the norm to happen. Like seeing a specific character or item or something with a person's name if I'm on the right track, and getting confirmations of like, okay, I see that sign. If I'm reading that sign accurately, please show me this other sign. And more often than not, I will get that sign. And it's just being in that very intuitive flow with God and recognizing that, yes, pattern recognition is all well and good. And you can probably explain away some of the signs and synchronicities that I have seen. The level at which I see them and the complexity in which I see them and the timing. There was someone that I was, and I'm still very convinced that that specific relationship was manipulated to happen. And I had this nudge to just ask, like, hey, has, this person reached out to you? And the response was kind of off or odd. And it was just something that I kind of filed away. It was as something that was weird, but it just was. It was just something that I noted. And I think it was about 10 days later, I had asked again, and the response that I got from this specific person, lies by omission were very big. And it's something that I tracked and tracked and tracked. And it took me a little bit to put that together. But the way that they responded was just didn't sit right. And so I asked God for a sign in my head. I had asked for something that tied to the first person that I had asked about, with the person's name that I was asking. And I'll never forget, less than an hour later, we're at the park with my kids, and I look over, and they had changed into a shirt with that specific thing on it. And so it was them. It's them wearing it with that specific thing that I had asked for, and they weren't wearing that when I asked. And so not only that, but about an hour later, I was looking on the back, and there was a specific title on the back of the shirt that tied back to the first person. And so just things like that where I don't believe in coincidence. And so having that pattern recognition of like, okay, these things seem off, but also recognizing signs that you ask for are readily available to you. They're given to you. And so I'm not entirely sure if this has gotten wildly off topic, but with this, when you recognize that things are happening for you, not to you, Everything is happening for your greater good, whether you can see it in the moment or not. All the pivots, all the big shifts, all of the manipulation and the lies, all of the things that, frankly, just break your heart. It's all for your greater good. Even if you can't see it in that moment, you'll come to find eventually that it kind of set you where you're supposed to be. And so, just like Judas betraying Jesus, Jesus knew it was going to happen and he let it happen because it was all part of God's plan. And yeah, we can't control the actions of others. All we can do is pay attention, recognize it, protect our peace, and learn to heal and grow. Okay, so here's the spoken word that I mentioned earlier. And I did want to mention a lot of these times my babbles. So if you've been following me on Facebook, my hashtag AshBabble, these write ups that happen are kind of, spur of the moment. I'll wake up at about 3 or 4 in the morning when I'm going through like a healing cycle that usually lasts for a few months. I'll wake up and not be able to go back to sleep until I get whatever's in my brain out. And so this happened a couple nights ago, and I want to share with you guys. So it says, I can't quantify or fully articulate my pattern recognition. The way things stand out and let me know that something is off or inconsistent or that the puzzle piece doesn't quite fit. It clues me into others' lies by omission, their true intentions, and exactly where their actions don't align with their words. I've come to learn that my journey wasn't guided by pattern recognition alone. It was equal parts recognizing, identifying, and documenting, with just as much trust in God's divine guidance and intervention in my life. Where my own recognition failed, I trusted God to light up my puzzle and show me where and how the pieces fit. Sometimes it was almost instantaneous. Sometimes it took time. Sometimes it required me to trust my inner knowing that something wasn't right and take that leap anyway, before God brought me the answers and the receipts. This journey is about growth and learning and breaking cycles. When we know better, we do better. We stop becoming like the people and situations that hurt us. We stop letting the comfort of our ego and how others perceive us dictate our decisions. We stop accepting others' misguided beliefs and opinions as the framework for how we live our lives. Once I stopped shrinking myself, boxing myself in, and spending so much energy trying to change who God made me to be just to make others comfortable, that's when it all clicked. I stopped dimming my intelligence to be more easily digestible. I stopped apologizing unnecessarily for just being myself. I stopped caring whether I came across as too much or accepting any number of labels that others tried to write for me. Once you recognize the pattern, you come to realize that embracing who you are was always your greatest superpower. It's what unsettled them the whole time. Get too bright and it exposes insecurities. Stand firm in truth and accountability, and it may flare up hostility and resentment. The pieces of the pattern are the things you know, on some conscious or subconscious level, are just weird or feel off, even if you can't explain it yet. They may not be logical, they may not even be overtly malicious, but they don't fit. The solution was to take it to God, to hand over the reins to my own understanding, and trust that the answers I asked for would come in time. I asked for them. I asked for signs that I was on the right track, and more often than not, I received them. I don't use this for every little thing, but over time I've proven to God enough times that if I'm asking for a sign, it's a last resort to my own inner knowing. The key was bringing it all to Him. This has saved me more times than I can count. It's pulled me from situations, relationships, places where I wasn't meant to be anymore. Once I trusted Him and took the leap, clarity followed. He would light up my puzzle and show me where the pieces fit. Your puzzle won't always come together quickly or cleanly, but through it you learn patience, endurance, resilience, discernment. You learn that every little thing is by divine design. You learn that not everything is random. You learn to trust that growth has a purpose, and you let that be enough. You stop pushing to get back into rooms you weren't meant to be in. You stop dimming your light so others don't have to look at themselves. You create space that repels what is inauthentic, anything built on shaky foundation, anything that's not rooted in Him. When you embrace that God meant for you to be a lighthouse, you learn to rebuild on Jesus, the rock. When we do, it doesn't matter what storms come, what winds of gossip try to tear at the house, what manipulation shows up dressed like a sheep. God is with you, waiting for you to ask Him to light up your puzzle, to seek Him instead of leaning solely on your own understanding. We can think we're highly intelligent, but the more I learn, the more I understand that the wisest person knows nothing at all. Matthew 7:24-25. These words I speak to you are not incidental additions to your life, homeowner improvements to your standard of living. They are foundational words to build a life on. If you work these words into your life, you're like a smart carpenter who built his house on solid rock. Rain poured down, the river flooded, or a tornado hit, but nothing moved that house. It was fixed to the rock. Yeah.